I am so grateful to get to be here today with the famous Emily Brant. We are looking forward to having a conversation that navigates and connects to decolonization, topics like rest and reciprocity. How do we do less while making a bigger impact? And so much more. We are just kind of meeting each other for the first time and looking forward to wandering through this conversation together and seeing where we go. So, welcome, Emily. I'm so grateful to be here with you.
Thank you, Shelby. Thanks for having me. I'm super grateful as well, and I'm really excited to dive into this conversation together.
Yeah. I'm going to share a little bit about you and then you're welcome to add.
Okay.
I have been introduced many times to Emily's work through clients I work with and other therapist and coach colleagues. And every time somebody talks about you, I notice their whole body softens. And it's
Aw.
like their heart just starts coming forward and they seem at ease and just glowing talking about you and how they feel held in your presence. So I wanted to start with that.
Wow. Thank you. That's such a
Yeah.
beautiful reflection. Thank you.
It's so true. And I feel that way too, having just met you and when I
Mm.
interact with your content, everything that comes out of your list, all of that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And so Emily Anne Brant is an Indigenous writer, speaker, and mentor working at the intersection of personal development and decolonization. She is Turtle Clan from the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte First Nation,
Quinty.
Quinte First
Yeah.
Nation.
Yep. Yep.
Emily is on a mission to decolonize the personal development and coaching industry and works with coaches, leaders, and all types of therapists and healers to create more inclusive spaces. Yes. At the heart of it all is fostering communities where everyone feels seen, safe, and truly supported so that we can grow and rise together. Wow, Emily, yes. Anything you want to add to that or reflect upon with that?
Thank you for that. Not too much to add. I think, it's like one thing to be like, this is my bio and what I do and where I'm from. And then, really, though, I think the way we get to know each other is when we start to talk and share our stories and share our hearts. And so I love that this conversation or this podcast is relationship as medicine, because that is so true. Relationships are everything. And so I'm just excited to be in relationship, be in community with you and with everyone listening. So thanks again for having me. I guess the one little thing I would add is that pronouns are she, her, in case we didn't say that. But yeah, happy to be here.
I'm so grateful. Thank you for giving of your time. I am so looking forward to this.
Me too.
Well, I'd love to hear what inspires you or inspired you to step into this work, to be offering your work in the way that you did, personal, professional, as vulnerable or not vulnerable as you want to get.
Hmm. Yeah, it's kind of a long story, but to make it shorter, I grew up on a First Nations reserve. So my reserve is Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. So I was surrounded by mostly other Mohawk kids, but started experiencing racism as early as like age 6 or 7 when we would go off reserve and meet up. We'd have like, track and field meetups or whatever, dance meetups with other schools. So I was exposed to racism at a pretty young age, but not a ton of it because being on the reserve. But then I went off reserve for high school in a relatively small city, relatively white city with a lot of racism. And so quickly learned that because I have lighter skin and I am what's called white presenting, it became a coping mechanism and just like safer and easier to just kind of ignore my Mohawk roots, my indigeneity, and just try to blend in at this Canadian, primarily white high school. And so pretty young, that was like age 14, 15, right, when you go to high school. Pretty early on, I learned to like abandon the roots of who I am, right, and my identity, and already had kind of identity conflicts even being on the reserve because while I feel fortunate that I got to grow up on the reserve and learn about my culture mostly through the school and our songs and our legends and our language. We learned all of that. I didn't learn French in school. I learned Mohawk. But I felt not Indigenous enough because I have mixed ancestry. So I have European settler and Algonquin First Nation ancestry on my mom's side. But not just that, it was more that like some kids in my class, they went to ceremonies, they went to Longhouse, and they did all the powwow dancing and the regalia and all of that with their family. But my family didn't do that, and a lot of families didn't do that because of colonization and being forced to like assimilate. And so my dad, and his parents really are very disconnected from the culture and the language. So I always had already that like where do I fit in kind of thing. But then you go to high school and and then off to college and out in the bigger world, which, yeah, there was just a lot of racism. There's no other way to really say it. So I just learned that coping mechanism of like putting away that part of me that wasn't safe to navigate the workplace, wasn't safe to navigate high school, and so on and so on. So I essentially abandoned this whole part of myself and entered the personal development space, also kind of just leaning into this like white part of myself, this white identity, which isn't really me, but was like the coping mechanism piece. But something always felt off and like it was missing. And doing this like law of attraction and manifestation work felt sticky, it felt really hard for me. I was like, why is this like so magical for everyone else? But for me, it's feeling really hard. And I was manifesting some like pretty cool things, but it was taking so much effort. Um, and so one day I asked in a psychic reading, like, Spirit, what is going on? And why is this work so hard? And then Spirit said to me through the psychic that it's related to your self-worth and it's related to like your Indigenous ancestors and ancestry. And yeah, I was like, at that point, now it's been years that I've been kind of just trying to blend in as another Canadian white woman and um, had this whole thing of not even feeling Indigenous enough. So I was like, what? Like, that can't be it. I'm not even Indigenous enough for that to be a thing. Like, what do you mean I have ancestral self-worth stuff to heal? But Spirit said, well, that's part of it, right? Is like not feeling enough, not and of course it makes so much sense now. Like, of course you can't manifest your full potential when you're operating as only part of yourself. You're not bringing your whole self. And there was so much to be healed there. And that just opened like that one psychic reading, as silly as it sounds, like that really changed my life because it just opened up this whole can of worms and essentially launched me into this like identity crisis of like, oh, that's right. I've been abandoning this whole part of myself. And then I sat and I was like, okay, ancestors, what is here? What's here to heal? And it was so emotional. There's obviously so much. And so I've been on that healing journey and really decolonizing myself, reclaiming my roots. And while on this journey, I was in the personal development space. I was working with coaches, I was working with healers, I was working with quote unquote light workers. And when I brought this topic forward, no one knew what to do with it. It was
Yeah.
like crickets. No one wanted to touch it. And that's when I realized, oh, actually, now that I look back, this industry I've been partaking in for the last 5 years, none of these rooms were talking about assimilation or colonization or racism. We were actually taught not to because the rhetoric is like, well, we're all one and we all have our own personal power. We all have spiritual power anyway. Don't like argue for your limitations. Don't focus on those. And so realizing this industry that I love so much for many ways had also been like operating as a function of white supremacy was really like heartbreaking, but it cracked me open. And it's what led to me doing the work that I'm doing now because I was like, oh, someone's going to have to teach people how to hold these conversations. And then eventually I first started working just with Indigenous folks and folks of the global majority. And then I was like, no, like folks of European descent need to hear these conversations too. And
Mm.
so then that's what led to me doing the work that I do now.
Wow, what
I
a
did,
ride.
I did not make the long story short. I kept it long, but I feel it's important to share.
We have plenty of time. Is there more from your story that wants to be shared? There's no agenda here.
Hmm. I guess just if anyone's wondering like what kind of inside those containers looked like. So when I say that no one knew how to hold it, I literally mean I was met with silence in one case. So I brought forward the like I was in a mastermind at the time. It was quote unquote high level business mastermind, super active group chat. We had a Voxer group chat, 20 women in there, mostly white women. And this was a buzzing group chat. If I had gone in and said, you guys, I'm having a money mindset block, or I'm feeling stuck in the middle of this launch, there would have been pages and pages of voice notes and responses to me. But I went in and said, hey, I'm going through an identity crisis, and I realize that I've abandoned my indigeneity because I was safer to assimilate to whiteness and just like abandon my whole roots. And now I'm dealing with all of this ancestral trauma that's coming up. And it was literally crickets. And even the leader of the space, the mentor, she just liked my message, like heart reacted, and then didn't say anything.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah. Ouch. So I was like, okay, now I feel unsafe.
Hmm.
I put something very vulnerable out there, and then for it to be met with silence was just not okay. Um, and so then I had a one-on-one later with that coach, and I was like, oh gosh, she's probably gonna address it, and then I'm gonna have to make her feel better or like explain why
Mm.
it wasn't okay. But that didn't even happen. She just completely acted like it didn't happen. And so I just felt unseen. I felt unsupported. I felt unsafe. Um, and then yeah, it just really prompted that reflection of like actually all the spaces I've been in. And I also realized that it's a privilege that I've been in there with light skin and just essentially assuming the role of a white person, but we've never had those conversations, and I can guarantee they wouldn't have been received well in any of the previous spaces that I was in. And then I also started thinking all the people I was learning from, all the mentors I hired, all the books I was reading, they were all from white men and women. And so then it also got me thinking about the importance of representation and reciprocity, and where we're putting our dollar and who we're putting our dollar into. And if we are going to put, if I am going to invest in somebody who holds more earning power and privilege, such as a white woman, what are her values? Do they match mine? Because if they don't, I'm not putting my money there anymore. So
Mm.
that was another big lesson.
I love that boundary. I just felt like goosebumps and
Yeah.
chills all at the same time.
Yeah, it feels really good.
Yeah. As you're talking, I just feel such a deep tenderness. And when you mentioned, after having that psychic reading and then connecting with your ancestors, maybe
Yeah.
in a different way after that, I just felt like tears for that
Mhm.
connection. And I really thank you for sharing that. It sounds vulnerable.
Thank you. Yeah, it is really sacred and really tender. There was so many tears. There still are, but I feel like I'm a few years into this journey now, but when it was brand new, it was brand new. Like I didn't know how to connect with ancestors, and no one taught me actually. I just sat down. I just sat down on my little meditation cushion and was like, all right, ancestors, come forward. I don't know what I'm doing. I just close my eyes and set the intention. And I've realized like that's all it takes actually. So I just closed my eyes and set the intention to connect with them. And they were chatty. They were ready to come forward. They were like, finally, you're here. And they showed me, oh, yeah, some. really heartbreaking stuff. I don't know how much folks know about like the history of colonization in Canada or in Turtle Islands, so Canada and the USA's like, but they so we had residential schools where children were literally ripped off their parents' lap and taken from their front lawns of their homes and forced to go to these schools to learn English, to have their native language literally beaten out of them, to have their ceremonies, their the healing, the spiritual ways of being, cultural ways of being, all stripped away. The goal was literally to kill the Indian in the child,
Mm.
which we don't use that term anymore, but like that's the literal wording that was used, and that was the goal. And in many ways, it succeeded in the sense that um, very few First Nations, Inuit, and Métis folks know how to speak their native language. All of us speak English. Many became Christian or Catholic, which was another big goal. Um, and we're operating in a very Eurocentric way and society. But in many ways, they did not succeed because somehow my ancestors, our ancestors, were resilient enough and strong enough and clever enough to hold on to our language and some of our traditions, like smudging and using smoke medicine and dancing and singing and drumming and ceremony. And we still have that, even though it's fragmented and so many of us are trying to reconnect with it and relearn it, we still have it. And I think that's such a miracle. So I try to focus on that. And it really, such an emotional journey because there's joy when you reconnect to it, and there's grief for like how much has been lost. And that's what I want people to understand when they engage with Indigenous medicines and ways of being, is to just to have that reverence of like, it's a miracle this is still here, and let's get it first and foremost back into the hands of the Indigenous peoples who were painfully disconnected from it. That's what I wish people, especially in the spiritual spaces where lots of
Mm.
Indigenous practices are used, that's what I really want people to know.
Yes, 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 yes. Again, a boundary.
Yeah. Yeah. And not just
Yeah,
to know, but to feel, to
yeah.
feel.
Oh, it's really interesting because you were talking about kind of being in the field of light workers and coaches, and the word spiritual bypassing keeps coming up for some reason, and it gives me like those icky chills. And I
Yeah.
can't figure out, in the back of my mind, I'm like, why is that coming up here? Like, is there something you have to say about practitioner or to practitioners about the concept of spiritual bypassing, or is this just a thought that's rattling around in my brain?
No, for sure. I have lots to say about spiritual bypassing. I talk about it a lot. It's so common in the quote unquote light working new or what are they? New Earth,
New
um,
age.
New Age, star seeds. And I was all up in that space. So I first and foremost, like always lead with compassion and grace because I too got swept up in the rhetorics around like we're all one and just focus on love and light and good vibrations and high vibrations and don't focus too much on the negative or you'll attract more of the negative is a lot of the common narrative, especially in the like manifestation spaces that are so common in personal development. So, which are great. Like we totally, it's actually, so here's a whole other thing is like, it's a lot of manifestation has South Asian and Hindu roots. Um, and a lot of it also has Indigenous roots. Like we have in Mohawk and Haudenosaunee culture, one of our core principles is a good mind. And we are taught about the importance of having good thoughts and having gratitude. We started every single day with giving thanks to all of creation. And it's called the Ohando Garwa Dekwa, the words before all else. And that's literally how we start our days, greeting the sun, the trees, the birds, the people, the water, every part of creation with just gratitude in our heart. So it was interesting to learn these concepts from white teachers and then it didn't click for me for years like oh wait I already know this and this is from Haudenosaunee culture. Um, but anyway, back to the bypassing. It's often used, or you might hear it called toxic positivity as well. It's often used to just kind of bypass very real issues that cannot be bypassed with just a positive thought and a can-do spirit, right? Like we can't, we can't just slap sunshine and rainbows on top of something like police brutality and think that it's going to go away, or not look at it and think that it's going to go away, because that's not how things heal, and that's not what an Indigenous perspective would say either. If there's something that's a problem, we address it and we face it head on. We address it in community, and we don't bypass it. So yeah, spiritual bypassing is when you're just using those good vibrations, love and light to just sort of ignore what's actually going on. So this actually happened to me in that same mastermind that I was in. I later brought up that I had this really cathartic conversation with an Indigenous colleague of mine who was like the first other Indigenous woman that I encountered doing this kind of work. And her and I were just chatting about like how we've been at our craft for years, the same amount of time as our white counterparts. And they seem to be like lapping circles around us in terms of their followers, in terms of their income, just like lapping us. And we're like, it was cathartic because we're like, yes, this is so real. Like it was so validating to like talk about it with someone and be like, yeah, like biases exist. People want to pay more attention to white women and white leaders and white voices, and they want to pay more money to those people as well. Like that's a very real thing.
Yeah.
And so I was just saying that to my group, and then my mentor at the time was like, but you're choosing to make that your story. Like, does that have to be your story? Does that have to be your story?
Uh,
Kid you not, that's what she said. So that's an example of like using that coaching rhetoric or that spiritual bypassing, that then it points the blame back on me as the individual, like as if I am projecting a story and I'm creating racism in my life because of my own thoughts. Like
you could also
that
call that gaslighting as
that's
well.
gaslighting too. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not
Exactly.
pretty. It actually re-perpetuates the very harm that is
Yeah.
wanting healing.
Yeah. It
And it
does.
happens so much.
Yeah, another I guess more bypassing example, because yeah, that one's totally more gaslighting than anything. But another bypassing is like when 2020 happened and more people were talking about race, the conversation finally somewhat started making its way into the coaching and healing spaces. And some were and some were not starting to talk about race. But there was one leader who is a very well-known coach. She coaches a lot of the other coaches, and then they coach coaches. She's one of the top people. And she acknowledged race in one of her videos, I remember. Um, and it started out like I was like, okay, we're going here. This is good. But then she said, like racism is real and systemic barriers are real. And we have to acknowledge that. And I was like, yes, yeah, like say that. We have to acknowledge it. And then she goes, but we all have personal power. And so it was like negated.
I watch your eyes just kind of do this like side eye kind of thing.
Yeah, it was like you did so well for a second, and then it was like you negated it with the but we all have personal power, and we can all, and she meant it from a very good intention of like empowering people. Like, yeah, there's systems working against you, but you still can tap into your personal power, and that is true. And it it negates like the reality of what actually exists from a person who does not have that same lived experience.
Right.
And
And totally inappropriate coming from a white woman.
that's when it becomes, yeah, a bit
Yeah.
problematic. But sometimes this rhetoric also comes from people of color, people of the global majority, because internalized colonialism is also a thing. Internalized white supremacy is also a thing. And I was one of those people for a while, like saying these same things, like, yeah, we're so much more than our identities, than our race. We are like souls, we're spirits, we're vibrations. I said all of that too. And then I had my like decolonial awakening and actually addressing the pain and the ancestral trauma and the realities that I'm up against, that's actually been the most healing thing. And that has propelled my manifestations, my success, my voice, my empowerment, everything forward since actually like acknowledging it. Because that's what's healing. Acknowledgement and validation. That's what's healing. We don't need you to like fix racism with clever coaching or therapy because that's not even possible, but just like hold space and validate.
I love that term, clever coaching.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that specifically?
Well, like the coach saying to me, does that have to be your story? Or can you write another
Yes.
story? Like, I didn't need you to coach me out of this. I just wanted you to witness me and hold space and say, yeah, that's valid.
Yeah, connection and validation. Empathy, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. So I'm working on a mini class right now called Holding Space for Race. And it's all about this one topic. And it's like, how to like just be in that discomfort because I'm guessing the coach felt uncomfortable and didn't want to just say like, yeah, that sucks for you. Like, sorry about that. But like how to just lean into be comfortable being uncomfortable and like make space for those conversations of race, especially if you have a different lived experience.
Mhm.
So I'm excited for
Absolutely.
that to come out soon.
Yes, it's so needed. There are like so many things that you just said and directions that I want to go from there. And we had talked about the experience of how do we do less while making a bigger impact. And that just came up as you were talking. I was thinking, oh, yeah, that clever coaching, like you don't even have to respond. You can do less and actually connect in such a deeper way.
Mhm.
And that also is a marker of like rest. When we are holding space for others, can we also be in a restful place? Can we create a space together of rest? We don't need to be
Yeah.
doing so much as we're supporting others. What might you say to all of this?
That's such a good point. I think that's such a colonial thing to what I was saying with the clever coaching is like, I need to fix it. I need to fix it. That's a colonial energy. Like, can we just let it be? Can we just sit in it?
Yeah.
Can we be uncomfortable in the discomfort? That, what you just said, I think is such a decolonial approach, versus that colonizer mindset that says we got to be productive, we got to find a solution to everything, we got to fix it all today, right now. And that's just not realistic when we're up against centuries of oppression and ancestral trauma. Like, we're not going to fix that with coaching or therapy, but we can say, I see you, and I'm making space here for your pain and your sacred tears, and they're all welcome here.
Mm.
Um, And I think that's what people feel when they come into my space and they're like, I can't put my finger on it, but it just feels like a safe place to land. Like it's a different energy and my nervous system feels different. And it's because we don't have that like I'm snapping like people can see me, but I don't have that like go go go, we got to fix it now, we got to do now. It's just like it's just okay to just be sometimes. Um,
Yeah.
and what I'll share with coaches too in the class is that like it's less about like I think we get in our heads too of like what's my response going to be? What am I going to say? How do I make myself look good? And it's less about what you say. It's actually like say less, but acknowledge and just like hold the space.
What it reminds me of, like when you're saying people come into your space and they're going, I feel safe and I really have no idea why, and it's never felt this way before. that I have to imagine, or I'm making up the story that they're feeling their ability to co-regulate with you because you're regulated. You're in
Mhm.
your space, in your body home, you're resting there. And it gives them so much permission to kind of take on that as their own experience sitting in themselves with you. Is that accurate?
Well, thank you. I hope so. I hope so. I will say like I'm human. I'm not always like, and even this word regulated, like actually my my therapist who, well, former therapist who is a white woman, she actually pointed out to me, she's like, I don't really like the word regulated because that seems colonial. Like, why do we have to regulate the nervous system? Why can't we just like soothe or bring ease to it or balance it? And I was like, oh, you're so right. So I love that. Um, but I'm human and there's ups and downs with my nervous system, but I my community, so we have live calls every month, and sometimes they will hold me through like when I'm going through something or I'm a little bit off kilter. So I wouldn't say that I'm always in this like perfectly grounded energy, but we always get there together. Um, and we have our tools. We always start with like breathing and just settling into our space together and smudging, and we get there together. So I think it's really like, I don't know,
Mm,
the community, it's hard to describe, but the community is really, it's medicine, it's relationships as medicine.
yeah. I feel like the we get there together is so key.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And I'm noticing in myself, I'm going, wait, what does that look like? Letting your community hold you? Like
Yeah.
my master's in therapy, colonial graduate education is like, wait, how? What? That's possible? Tell me more.
Yeah, that's a big one. Um, yeah, I think that's part of decolonizing too, is like removing the pedestal of being like, I have to be up here because I'm the space holder and you're down here because you're the clients, or, like I'm in here and you're over there and I have to be just like neutral and um, regulated or one way all the time, um, to a decolonial approach, a re-indigenized approach, which is like, no, this is a circle. We're all peers. This is like peer to peer. And I get to show up in my full humanness. And by doing that, then I'm giving you more permission to do the same. Um, so there's been times where I've showed up to the decolonized coach community calls and I'm like, hey, everyone, I don't have a riff to share today. Sometimes I start the calls with like a little riff. I don't have much to share today. I'm super tired. I'm burnt out. I need you to hold me a little bit and like bring your voice into the circle. And they'll be like, okay, we've got you, like rest. They're so amazing. They're the most amazing people in there. Um, and so, but a lot of them will tell me like, thank you for naming that you needed rest or for taking rest because I'm taking notes when you do that. And it gave me permission to do that. And so I just love that it's the more me I am, the more, you know, the more
Yeah.
themselves they can be.
And that in itself sounds more restful, more permission to
It
just
is.
be real so you're not having to perform. Like, it's like, oh yeah, this is just me and I'm gonna do this with you together.
It is. It's so much more easeful. Yeah. I'll show up to like no makeup, no bra. Like
Mhm.
this is we're decolonizing. We don't do perfectionism here. Show up as you are, and I'm doing the same. And um it's always really beautiful.
Oh, I just learned something so big. I told you before we got on the call, I've been having an emotional morning and this
Yeah.
time this time of year is brutal for me. I don't have family, I don't have kids.
Mm.
It's just like chronically dark. And I was like in this spin of like, how can I hold my group next week? Should I quit? Like, can I tell them that I'm having a major neurodiversity burnout when I'm the burnout specialist? Like, and I go into this place of like, that's not okay because I hear that from like past conditioning. You can't be burnout if you're the person that helps the people that are burnout. So
Mhm.
how do I pull it together? And this morning I was just like, I can't. So I'm gonna have to figure out a different way to do it because I can't keep doing it like this. So
Yeah, that's
you described a different way.
yay. Yeah, that's so good. That's exactly it. And honestly, okay, do that. Just let people in on how you're feeling and what you're going through, and then report back to me how it goes. Because every single time I do that, people are like, this makes me want to work with you even more. Like, this makes me trust you even more. Like, I already trusted you, but like, if there's anything else you're offering, I'm in because you're just so human and it feels like safer and permission giving. Like I just shared about how I was struggling with like the reciprocity in my business. Like Q1 and Q2 made a small profit, but there were so many expenses. Q3 was actually in the negative. And I work full time as well. So like if I work really hard in my 9 to 5 job. It's a busy job. It's a big job. And it's also in decolonization. So if I'm gonna have this like side thing and it's gonna take so much energy, I can't be like losing money for sure, and I can't be like barely breaking even. Like that's not gonna work for me. So I shared about that publicly, and then was sharing it with an existing client of mine, and she was asking about getting some business coaching calls, and I'm like, well, here's what I'm going through. And everything I just shared about like not making profit in Q3 and I'm trying to rework things so I can put less out and bring more money in and like sustain myself. I'm like, so all that said, if you still want business coaching, like this is what it's going to be. And she's like, yeah, that makes me want to work with you even more because I feel that's so common, but people aren't talking about it.
Yeah.
And so I love just like naming the thing that like so many are feeling, but not talking about it. And that creates so much community and trust.
Yeah. Oh, I just feel tears in my eyes with that permission and with the genuine humanness and transparency and letting other people decide. Like,
Yeah.
here, this is what's real instead of here's my smoke show. You want in? You know?
Yeah. Oh, I love that letting other people decide. Because
Yeah.
if someone is like, oh, wait, you're not a perfect burnout coach, I'm out of here, then like, did you really want that person in your space anyway? Because you would have been always like on edge
Yeah.
and feeling like you got to have it on and together, which is probably what leads to burnout. So it's like, it's really freeing. And I sound like so preachy when I'm saying all this, so I don't want to give the perception that I'm perfect at this by any means, because I'm not. These are just like things that I'm leaning into and I'm learning as I go as well.
I'm so grateful you're sharing them here because I am learning so much too. Let's, before we go today, talk about this concept or experience of reciprocity. I know it's been kind of alive for you and you just mentioned it. Can you say more?
Yeah, so reciprocity is like a healthy exchange of energy. And I learned from Asha Frost, who is a dear friend and a mentor of mine, another Indigenous woman. Um, and I learned from experiencing working with her that like an exchange, when you're paying someone money, can actually feel really good. It
Mhm.
was like sadly my first experience of being like, wow, I just paid you X amount of dollars and I would happily pay you 10 times over again because the reciprocity was there. Like I felt like what I paid in dollars was given back equally or more in the beautiful medicine that she offered me. Um, and that's when it really clicked for me, like, oh, like exchange can feel good and it should feel good. But so much of it had felt icky and wrong, and I almost regretted it every single time I like hired another colonial business mentor or whatever it was. Almost every time I like didn't feel good after. And then for the person like on the other end too, it has to feel good. You have to feel that you're receiving a fair energetic exchange, whether it is financial compensation or even trade. I've been doing a couple trades lately as a way of like re-indigenizing, and that's been really cool too.
Mhm.
Um, but whatever it is that I'm getting in return for my medicine and my work, my emotional labor, especially because this work is so personal and sacred, like you said, it's like letting people in on my healing of my lineage and my ancestral stuff and my personal stuff. Um, it has to feel, the exchange has to feel good. And so, yeah, I've been sitting a lot with rest and reciprocity and kind of set these boundaries and declared, like I said, like that Q3 going into the hole, like that's not going to work for me at all. And even just like barely making a small profit, that's also not going to work for me. Um, so since kind of declaring that just energetically and also putting it out there, I a post on Instagram and Facebook. I got a speaking gig that is paying me $2,500 for an hour, like no questions asked. I was like, this is my rate plus tax. They were like, cool. When can you do it? This day or this day? And I was like, wow, that was easy. And that's how I want it to feel. And that's how it should feel. And what I'm doing a lot this month is resting. And as I rest too, and I'm not just showing up and giving, giving, giving on Instagram, like I do a lot. I'm actually just receiving like out of the blue clients and people coming in and joining the DCC and which is my signature offer. And I'm really sitting in like, okay, this is what it feels like to just embody rest and receive. And then it fuels me to go out and serve more. And that's probably why I've had the energy to create that new class that I'm creating, to be really accessible, low ticket class because I'm getting fueled and I'm receiving on, the other side of it. So
Mm.
yeah, thinking about that a lot.
Ugh, it's just so needed, this whole paradigm shift. And I'm so glad that there are fruits of it for you.
Thank you. Yeah. Me too. I was like about to quit. I'm like, I cannot if there's no reciprocity. Like we all need it, right? And there's an extra layer of it when you're an Indigenous business and it's already hard. Like visibility is hard and being seen as a business or a person that's worthy of like whatever the dollar amount is already hard. So there's that extra layer too that I feel like if people who have higher earning power, people of European descent, like if they had to try to run a business with those like biases and those things working against them and ancestral trauma, like I'm like, I don't know if you would last a day. I don't know. Like we have to be so like so resilient. But that's why I say like the reciprocity really, really, really needs to be there. Because and then especially with just the nature of anti-racism or decolonization work too, like it's so easy to burn out and just crash your nervous system. That I've got to be taken care of too.
Absolutely. Times a million.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Is there anything else? Maybe we just take a couple breaths, feeling into,
Mhm.
is there anything else that wants to be spoken or expressed here today? Could be anything at all.
I think I just want to name that for anyone listening who might be new to decolonizing their practice or their work and feeling a little overwhelmed, um, to not run away from that, to like lean into that. There is so much to unlearn, for me included, for all of us. There's so much to relearn and learn. Uh, and you're never gonna get it all in like a weekend or a couple days or even a year. It's gonna be lifelong. But it's it's actually so freeing when you do this work for yourself. It frees your spirit because colonialism has disconnected us from our humanity and from each other, truly, and from our spirits. So there is no spiritual journey like decolonizing yourself. you'll become so free and your clients will become so free. And so doing this work, it makes such an impact. And something I always say is like your ripple effect matters. And so I just really want people to take that away from this episode, that your ripple effect matters. Like that one, that one coach, if they had held me in a different way, think about how that would have impacted me, and then I would have impacted others or other clients that were in the room that day. Just like the little things matter, and you matter, and your impact matters.
Mm, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling the truth of that in everything that you have shared today and show up with in your work. It's so big and it's so palpable. And I mean, it just feels so deeply meaningful and powerful to sit with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. Let people know how they can find you, what they can find, because I know they're all really excited to figure out how they can work with you and interact with you.
Oh, thank you. The easiest two ways are probably my website, which is emilyannbrant.com, and it's Emily, ANNE, brant.com. And then on Instagram, same handle, Emily Anne Brant. And then I also have a podcast called The Soul's Way. So you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. I haven't had an episode in a while, maybe when I reemerge from my rest season, but there's like 200 episodes there. There's a lot there. So you can check that out. And then I have a free ebook. You'll find all of this on the website or Instagram link, but there's a free ebook. There's my signature class, the Roundtable, and then there's my signature program, the Decolonize Coach Community. So there's an entry point for everyone, no matter what your finances are like right now. And then coming soon, there's also going to be another little mini class. So I'm excited
Mm.
for that.
Go over there, check it out. There's so much goodness. And
Thank
yeah, thank you. Thank you, Emily. I'm so grateful for this conversation.
you. Me too. Thanks.